More gravy, Derek? I asked, forcing a smile as I held up the gravy boat. My husband of 2 years gave me a withering look. This turkey is so dry I'd need to drown it to make it edible, he grumbled. I froze, the boat hovering stupidly in my hand. Dry turkey? Impossible. I'd hired Chef Marcello, one of the top chefs in the city, to prepare this meal. It had cost me a small fortune, but I wanted our first Christmas dinner as husband and wife to be perfect. Derek's complaints stung. I'd gone to such lengths only to have him criticize my efforts in front of both our families. Oh, come now, it's not that bad, his mother Ruth protested. Here, just needs more gravy. She scooped a big spoonful onto Derek's plate, shooting me an apologetic look. More gravy isn't going to rescue this disaster, Derek snapped. He shoved his plate away in disgust. Anger flared within me. How dare he disparage my cooking, and on Christmas no less? I wanted nothing more than to hurl the gravy boat at his impeccably gelled head. But I held myself back. Derek didn't know about my secret chef, and his family didn't know about our charade of a marriage either. Outwardly, I was the doting wife, slaving away in the kitchen to make my husband happy. I'm sorry the turkey isn't to your taste, I said softly. I did try my best. Derek snorted derisively. Well, clearly your best isn't good enough. Honestly, Eliza, I can't fathom how someone could mess up a simple turkey this badly. Simple turkey? This from a man whose idea of cooking was microwaving frozen burritos. I wanted to scream at him, but I swallowed my fury and turned meekly to my mother. Maybe you could show me your recipe again sometime. I really thought I had it right. My mother's eyes flashed with anger on my behalf, but she simply patted my hand gently. It's fine, dear. My recipe takes some practice. We'll work on it together. She shot a glare at Derek. Perhaps if your husband pitched in more in the kitchen, he'd know how difficult cooking can be. Derek bristled, opening his mouth for an angry retort. But his father, Michael, intervened. Now. No need to ruin Christmas dinner with petty squabbles. Eliza clearly worked hard on this meal, so let's just enjoy it, shall we? He gave his son a quelling look. With a huff, Derek turned sullenly back to his plate, sawing angrily at the turkey as if punishing it for its dryness. I hid a satisfied smile. Oh, he had no idea what was coming. I had barely even begun to ruin his Christmas. Just then the doorbell rang. Right on time. I'll get it, I said quickly. I ignored Derek's glare as I practically sprinted for the door, heart hammering with anticipation. This was it. My revenge began now. I took a deep breath and composed myself. Then I opened the door with a bright smile. Chef Marcello, so wonderful of you to stop by. I ushered the distinguished older gentleman into the foyer. Behind me, I heard the clatter of dropped silverware as my guests took in the unexpected arrival. Marcello inclined his head graciously. Of course, madame. I wanted to compliment you on the meal. It was prepared to perfection. I turned to Derek with an icy smile. Surprise, darling. I didn't actually cook this dinner. Chef Marcello did. Funny how even a professional got it so terribly, terribly wrong. Derek looked like he wanted to melt into the hardwood floor. His face turned bright red as Chef Marcello gave a slight bow. My apologies for the deception, the chef said smoothly, but Madame requested I keep my involvement discreet. My mother pressed a hand to her chest, eyes wide. My dad just shook his head in disbelief, but it was Derek's parents who reacted most strongly. What is the meaning of this? Michael demanded, rising from his seat. Eliza, why on earth would you embarrass Derek like this in front of his family? Ruth also stood up, glaring daggers at me. After everything we've done for you, we treated you like our own daughter. I stood calmly amidst the uproar. Believe me, you'll understand soon enough. I turned to Derek with an icy stare. Why don't you explain our little arrangement to your parents, darling? Derek's eyes blazed with anger and humiliation. For a moment, I thought he might actually lunge across the table at me. But then his shoulders slumped in defeat. Eliza and we're not exactly as we appear, he mumbled. What do you mean? Ruth asked sharply. Derek kept his eyes fixed on his plate. Things haven't been right between us for a long time. I'm away a lot for work on the weekends. I just needed companionship. Michael's face turned thunderous. Companionship? So you've been cheating on your wife? With who? I gave a cold, hollow laugh. Oh, he'll cheat on any young, gullible thing eager for a wealthy man's attention. I tossed photos of Derek with his mistress onto the table. Ruth gasped, and Michael roared in outrage. "You snakes," he bellowed. "We welcomed you into our family." Derek's head snapped up, his eyes locking with mine. "This dinner was a setup," he snarled. "You lying, vindictive bitch." He moved menacingly around the table toward me. My dad stepped forward to block him. "Watch yourself, boy," he growled. Derek ignored him. "I know what this is really about. You're pissed I made you quit your job. You want to leech away my money." I met his furious gaze unflinchingly. "You didn't make me do anything. I chose to leave my job because I loved you and trusted you, but clearly that trust was misplaced." Ruth wrung her hands. "Eliza, I don't understand. You two seemed so happy at the wedding." I smiled bitterly. "That's because Derek could be incredibly charming when he wanted something, and at first I was too blinded by love to notice I was just a prize to him." Michael jabbed an accusing finger at his son. "You conned us all. Eliza was right to expose your lies." He and Ruth hurried out, leaving Derek alone to face the consequences of his betrayal. My anger drained away, replaced by weariness. "The wedding was a dream," I told Ruth quietly. "But dreams don't last, and betrayals are hard to forgive." I turned my back on my infuriated husband. The man I had once loved so completely was a mere stranger to me now, and strangers could inflict deep wounds. The weeks after the Christmas fiasco were lonely ones. Derek buried himself in work, using it as an excuse to avoid me. Not that I minded. The charming, attentive man I had married was gone, replaced by a cold stranger, but the empty house wore on me. With too much time alone, my mind turned to darker thoughts, like why a successful man like Derek would even want a housewife. He used to brag about my marketing career, so why insist I quit after the wedding? I began to suspect he wanted me home, not just to cook and clean, but to keep me from prying eyes. Weekends were the worst, with Derek gone from morning till night. He claimed it was for business trips, but my trust in him had cratered. One Friday morning, I woke feeling particularly low. I shuffled to the kitchen in my bathrobe, sighing at the sink full of Derek's dishes from the night before. As I washed up, I spotted his cell phone charging on the counter. He must have forgotten it. A jolt of adrenaline shot through me. Here was my chance to find out what Derek was really up to. My hands shook as I scrolled through his texts. Most were mundane work messages, until I found a thread with a woman named Amber. My chest clenched as I read their suggestive messages planning a weekend rendezvous. So this was why Derek insisted I stay home. Not to cook and clean, but so he could sneak off with his mistress. I wanted to hurl his phone across the room, but I restrained myself. The texts provided concrete proof of Derek's affair, proof I would need for the next phase of my plan. I forwarded the messages to myself before replacing the phone. Derek would pay for making a fool of me, for parading me around as his doting wife while he snuck off to lavish affection on another woman. My mom was reluctant when I asked her to secretly move in for a while under the guise of being our new housekeeper, but she agreed after I confessed my plan to expose Derek's affair. "Just be careful, Eliza," she urged. "Revenge can be satisfying, but also dangerous." "Don't worry, Mom. I know what I'm doing." And I did. With her help, I gathered more evidence of the affair. Credit card receipts from romantic dinners and hotel stays. Photos of Derek and Amber locked in intimate embraces. I hid it all away, waiting for the right moment. Planning my revenge was thrilling but strange. The man I was trying to destroy had been my whole world mere months ago, but that man had never really existed. So I hardened my heart and focused on vengeance. Derek didn't realize what was coming. He underestimated me from the start, the doting wife too blinded by love and trust to doubt him. But I was not that woman anymore. And at Christmas dinner, my deception would eclipse his. My exposure of Derek's affair would stun our families. But more importantly, it would free me from the prison of this toxic marriage. I touched the photo of Amber tucked away in my dresser. "You stole my happiness," I whispered to the image of her pretty, smiling face. "Now I'm taking back what's mine." Derek would learn you can't treat people like pawns without consequences. I had all I needed to bring his house of lies crashing down. Now all that remained was timing. I just had to bid my time through this charade of a marriage a little longer. Soon Derek would regret the day he ever betrayed me. "More wine, ma'am?" I smiled at my mother as she refilled my glass in the guise of our housekeeper, Anna. "Thank you, Anna." It was a Friday night, and Derek would not be home. My mother and I were enjoying the opportunity to openly discuss our plans for the impending holiday dinner. So I'll confront him first and then you come in as the chef? I confirmed. Mom nodded. It's less predictable that way. Derek won't know what hit him. I smiled victoriously. Exactly. He's gotten away with this for too long. It's time for a dose of karma. I retrieved the manila envelope I had hidden away and started reviewing its contents. Hard evidence of Derek's betrayal, credit card receipts from restaurants and jewelry stores for his mistress, Amber, hotel charges for weekend stays, incriminating photos, and the pièce de résistance, printouts of Derek's suggestive text conversations with Amber. Mom peered over my shoulder and whistled. Wow, you've really done your homework here. Derek won't have a leg to stand on. I felt a surge of pride. Gathering this evidence had required meticulous planning and patience, but soon it would all pay off. I figured we need overwhelming proof, even if his family are reluctant to believe it at first, I explained. Seeing their precious son for who he really is won't be easy for them. Mom shook her head, her expression a mix of sadness and anger. I still can't believe Derek would do this. He seemed like such a nice young man. I sighed, thinking back to those idyllic early days with Derek, how charming and attentive he'd been. I think that was just an act. The real Derek, the one who insisted I quit my job and stay home, is controlling and dishonest. An act to hide his true nature. I had fallen for it completely, but not anymore. Well, after Christmas he won't be deceiving anyone else, Mom said firmly. We clinked glasses in anticipation of Derek's comeuppance. I savored the prospect of finally making him pay. Oh, and I have one more surprise in store, I said with a wink. I invited Amber to the dinner. She thinks she'll be meeting Derek's parents. Won't she be shocked to see me instead? Mom gasped delightedly. Eliza, that's absolutely diabolical. I love it. I grinned, feeling energized and empowered. For too long I had played the role of dutiful, naive wife. No more. Derek didn't realize it yet, but everything was about to change. Don't worry, I was careful about how I contacted her, I assured Mom. Derek won't suspect a thing. Soon I would take back my independence, exposing Derek's web of lies to our families in the process. He had hurt me deeply, but he had also awakened a vindictive side I didn't know I possessed. After Christmas, Derek's picture-perfect life would be shattered, and I would finally be free. Christmas morning dawned crisp and clear. I should have been full of warm cheer for the holiday. Instead, my heart hammered with anticipation for the dinner ahead. In the kitchen, Mom and I prepared the meal, ensuring everything was perfect. Well, perfect except for Derek's dry turkey. We giggled conspiratorially as we deliberately ruined it. This will really send him into a rage when he thinks you made it, Mom said gleefully. She sobered quickly, though. You're sure you want to go through with this, Eliza? I nodded firmly, ignoring my nervous flutterings. I'm sure. Exposing Derek is the only way I'll be free of him. Mom squeezed my shoulder. Okay, just remember, we're in this together. Together. Unlike my sham of a marriage built on Derek's lies. Anger stirred in my gut, overcoming any last reservations. I was ready. I paid meticulous attention to my appearance before the guests arrived, styling my hair just so and applying flawless makeup. I needed to look composed and confident, not like a scorned wife. Derek arrived first, kissing my cheek perfunctorily. House looks nice, he said with a glance around. Well, make sure dinner doesn't ruin it. I forced a smile. I hope it exceeds your expectations. Oh, it would exceed them all right, but not in the way Derek anticipated. My nerves threatened to resurface as the families gathered, but I kept my poise. Only Mom knew the tempest brewing inside me. At last, we were all seated around the table laden with food. Derek's parents heaped praise on the spread. This looks wonderful, Eliza, Ruth said. You've outdone yourself. Outdone herself, indeed. I nearly laughed out loud. Ruth had no idea a professional chef prepared this meal, but she would soon enough. Let's dig in, Derek said, carving into the turkey. He lifted a bite to his mouth, chewing slowly. I held my breath. His face darkened. It's so dry I can barely swallow, he spat, throwing down his fork angrily. Did you even cook this thing fully, Eliza? And there it was, my cue. I made a show of looking hurt at first. Then I stood slowly, fire in my veins. Actually, Derek, I didn't cook this at all. Chef Marcello handled the whole meal. I stepped aside with a theatrical sweep of my arm as Mom entered, right on time in her chef's uniform. A collective gasp rang out around the table. Derek froze, eyes wide with shock and rage. I smiled coldly. Surprise, darling. It seems even the best chef in town couldn't satisfy your palate. Derek leapt to his feet. How dare you embarrass me like this? He jabbed a finger at me. This little stunt just proves you're nothing but a petty, vindictive bitch. I didn't flinch. Sticks and stones, Derek. Now sit down. We're just getting started. The room crackled with tension. Derek's parents looked bewildered and alarmed. My father sat ramrod straight, ready to intervene if needed. This was it. My moment had arrived. Derek glared at me, fists clenched. The rest of the family looked on warily. I smiled coldly. What's wrong, darling? You seem nervous. Enough games, Eliza, Derek growled. Explain yourself right now. I shrugged. It's quite simple. You've been lying to everyone about our marriage while carrying on an affair behind my back. Gasps erupted around the table. Derek's mother grasped his arm. Derek, is this true? He yanked away angrily. Of course it's not true. Eliza is clearly having some kind of mental breakdown. He turned on me, seething. I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're going to regret this little stunt. I laughed derisively. Oh, am I? That's interesting, considering I haven't even gotten to the best part yet. I slapped the manila envelope down onto the table. Derek eyed it warily. What's that? Michael asked in a hard voice. Evidence of your son's deceit, I replied. I opened the envelope and slid the contents across the table. Credit card statements, photos of Derek with a younger blonde woman, incriminating text messages. Michael and Ruth flipped through them, faces pale. Ruth's hands trembled. Derek, how could you? She whispered. He jumped to his feet. This is all fake, he shouted desperately. Eliza is setting me up. I shook my head. Come now, Derek. Lying will only dig the hole deeper. I paused. But perhaps you need more convincing. Right on cue, the doorbell rang. Derek looked at me sharply. Who the hell is that? I moved calmly to answer the door. When I returned, I was accompanied by a petite young blonde woman, Amber. Hello, Sullivan family, she said brightly, oblivious to the tension. Sorry I'm late. Derek's face drained of color. I smiled serenely. You must be Amber, so glad you could join us. Although you seem to be confused, this is my family, not Derek's. Comprehension dawned on her face. She backed away slowly. Wait, who are you? I'm Eliza, Derek's wife. Amber's mouth fell open in dismay. She turned on Derek angrily. You told me you were divorced, Derek exploded. You deceitful witch! How dare you orchestrate this ambush? You'll regret crossing me, I promise you that. He lunged for me in a rage, but my father intervened, shoving him back down into his chair. Sit down and shut up, boy. Derek buried his head in his hands. Around him, his family bombarded him with recriminations. I welcomed you into our family. Michael roared. Ruth wept quietly. Amber hurried out in humiliation. In the chaos, I slid quietly away with a triumphant smile. My revenge was complete. Now to begin my new life. Derek sat motionless amidst the barrage of recriminations from his family. I stood calmly, arms folded. Well, Derek, anything to say for yourself? I asked mildly. He leapt to his feet, pointing a trembling finger in my face. You deceitful bitch. This little show changes nothing between us. I raised an eyebrow. Doesn't it? Because your family seems quite convinced now about your despicable character. Michael grabbed Derek's shoulder roughly. Your wife just exposed you as a liar and a cheat, and you have the gall to insult her? Derek wrenched away angrily. This is ridiculous. You're all going to just take her word over mine? Ruth dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. It's not just her word, Derek. The evidence is clear. The credit cards, the photos. Her breath hitched on a sob. How could you betray us all like this? Derek's confident facade was crumbling. Good. I wanted him to feel the same humiliation I had felt at his hands. Those photos proved nothing, he insisted, but the fight had gone out of him. He knew the battle was lost. I almost felt pity for him then. He looked so defeated, so small, a far cry from the swaggering, domineering husband I had known. But then I remembered the lonely weekends, the endless hours fretting over his lies. My resolve hardened. Face it, Derek. Your double life has been exposed. Did you really think you could keep deceiving everyone forever? He sank down into his chair. All arrogance fled. In its place was a broken, desperate man. Eliza, please, he croaked. We can work this out. I stepped forward and lifted his chin. The time for working things out disappeared the first night you crawled into bed with Amber. We're through. Michael grasped Derek's shoulder, fury etched on his face. You've shamed our family for the last time. I don't ever want to see you again. Ruth sobbed quietly, dabbing at her eyes. To think we welcomed you into our family. We treated your wife like a daughter. Her eyes flashed angrily at Derek. You disgrace us all. They turned away, supporting each other as they left him alone to nurse his wounds. He reached for me weakly. Eliza? I pulled away, skin crawling at his touch. We have nothing more to say. I'll be filing for divorce immediately. He crumpled, head in hands. I walked away without looking back. The man I had loved was gone, if he ever even existed. All that remained was a pathetically broken shell. I stepped outside into the bracing air. The cold chilled my tear-streaked cheeks, but I breathed deeply. I was finally free. In the icy air outside, I gulped lungfuls of breath, exhilarated by my victory. Inside, Derek remained trapped in the wreckage of his ruined life. I had gambled everything on this confrontation, unsure if I could really topple the pillar of lies supporting my marriage. But Derek's web of deceit lay in tatters. The revealing of his double life was my emancipation. I left Derek to wallow in self-pity and slipped back inside. In the dining room, Amber sat crumpled against the wall, sobbing into her hands. She flinched when she saw me. I'm sorry, she choked out. I didn't know he was married. Looking at her tear-stained face, my anger evaporated. She was just another of Derek's victims, foolish perhaps, but undeserving of this humiliation. I squeezed her hand gently. It's not your fault. Derek lied to us both. What matters now is that we move on, without him. She looked up, eyes rimmed with red but resolute. With a quivering smile, she squeezed my hand back. Sometimes wisdom emerged from even the most broken places. I returned to the dining room, where Derek still sat slumped in despair. At my entrance, he leapt up. Eliza, please, can't we talk about this? He moved towards me, hands extended beseechingly. I stepped back. There's nothing left to say. It's over, Derek. He grabbed for my wrist. You can't just throw away our entire marriage. I wrenched my arm away, skin crawling from his touch. This sham of a marriage was over long ago. You ended it, not me. Derek's voice broke. Haven't you punished me enough? This isn't about punishment, I said coldly. It's about revealing the truth and reclaiming myself. I won't be party to your lies anymore. I turned my back on his anguished face. Let him drown in misery. He had inflicted enough on me. His plaintive cries followed me out, hammering against my resolve. But I did not falter. The time had come to close this wound for good. In the hallway, I embraced my parents. It's over, I whispered. I'm finally free. Dad's eyes glistened with tears as he hugged me close. I'm so proud of you, Eliza. You're the strongest woman I know. I turned to Mom. Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you. She squeezed my hands, her eyes shining. That's what family is for. Now go and start your new life. I stepped outside, turning my face up to the winter sun. Its radiance warmed my reborn spirit. I had emerged from the darkness, scarred perhaps, but unbroken. Later that week, I filed for divorce, retaining an ironclad lawyer who ensured I received a fair settlement. Derek fought at first but eventually surrendered, too drained to prolong the battle. With my new independence secured, I reclaimed my job at the marketing firm, rising higher than ever before. Derek faded into the past, too, a cautionary tale left behind. Sitting in my new corner office, I smiled as I looked at the glimmering city skyline. The future stretched before me, full of possibility. I had taken back my life, and this time I was building it on my own terms.